We're so pleased to have you all joining us today for our conversation on engaging older adults and young people remotely, lessons learned during the pandemic. Um, we are going to, again, just sort of as folks are joining us, to share a little bit about Generations United. We're a national membership and advocacy organization. We work to improve the lives of children, youth, and older people through intergenerational collaboration, public policies, and programs. We were founded over 30 years ago by leading aging and children's organizations to advocate for policies and practices promoting cooperation and collaboration among the generations. In the words of one of our co-founders, Jack Osofsky, we created Generations United to argue for a caring society. And that's what we are here today to talk about. You can find out more about Generations United and access all of our free resources at our website, which is this is what the home screen looks like. It's www.gu.org. We're really honored to be able to host these Zoom conversations on intergenerational work during the pandemic. And I want to thank the Rrf Foundation on Aging for supporting this webinar and 3 new resources that we are going to be releasing later this month. We'll have a fact sheet on the benefits of intergenerational programs, a report on making the case for intergenerational work in your community, and a fact sheet on remotely connecting the generations, a lot of the content that we're talking about today. You can learn more about the benefits of intergenerational programs during a webinar that we're co-hosting with the American Society on Aging in 2 weeks, and we will share a link in chat for how to register for that free webinar. I know we're all Zoom experts now, but did have a couple of reminders. One is please keep yourself muted. If you are calling from the phone or joining by phone, *6 will mute and unmute you if you don't have a easily accessible mute key. We are going to be using the chat feature, which you can see at the bottom of your screen. If you click at the chat button right now, you get the chat panel will open up, and we just want to test it out and get folks used to using chat. So please type your name, where you're joining from, and an idea, tip, or question you have about connecting the generations remotely. So I'm going to open up chat so I can see. Hopefully folks will start sharing that information there, where they're from. So it's great. We have a great group of people I know coming from all over the country. And then we are recording this call. So we will email a link of the recording to everyone who's registered as soon as it's available, as well as any other resources that are shared during the call. So I now want to turn it over to Amy Eisenstein from the Rrf Foundation for Aging. Amy, thanks for joining us today.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Amy Eisenstein. I'm Senior Program Officer at Rrf Foundation for Aging. We are a grant-making organization with an enduring commitment to older people. We're based in Chicago, and Rrf is one of the nation's first private foundations focused on improving the quality of life of older adults. We're now about 1 year into our new strategic plan that includes an emphasis on social and intergenerational connectedness. Through this priority area, we support efforts that promote meaningful social connections, including those that span the generations. And through this area, we're really proud to be able to provide funding to Generations United for them to do this work that we're going to hear about today. Before I hand over the virtual microphone, I want to make a quick plug. We've just announced a new special issue in the Journal of Environmental Research and Public Health on intergenerational programs and health. So the call for submissions is now open through February of 2022. So you have a while, but I'd encourage all of you working in this area to be thinking of a potential submission. And I'm happy to share that post in the chat. And finally, I just want to thank Generations United for the invitation to be here today. I'm really looking forward to hearing this wonderful presentation that you have planned. So thank you.
Thanks, Amy. I'm going to apologize for mispronouncing your name because I know I'm a Stein and I always get it wrong. So I'm sorry for that. We're really so grateful for the support of Rrf Foundation for Aging on our work, as well as just the intergenerational work in the field. It's just exciting to see more funders interested in supporting intergenerational work. So intergenerational practitioners are really the most creative people that I know. Under normal circumstances, we overcome challenges Oh, there, yeah, sorry, the slides moving. We overcome challenges, partners, recruitment, staffing, many logistics, and many more. And although no one has faced the severity of the challenges that have been presented by COVID-19 and the pandemic, we knew that there would be solutions that came out of this, bringing the generations together. We've been amazed by the variety of different intergenerational activities and initiatives that have adapted or started during the pandemic. So in addition to our conversation today, we will be sharing more about this work in our upcoming fact sheet, which you mentioned, as well as Generations United Virtual Conference, which is happening in June this year. There's a link there for more information where the conference will be virtual. So we'll be learning together in a virtual environment, as well as learning about intergenerational connections that are happening around the world. So today we're going to hear from 4 phenomenal presenters who are really doing creative work to engage younger and older people remotely. Following their presentations, we'll have time for question answer discussion, but please post any questions, challenges, ideas that you have in chat. We'll be monitoring those and pulling those out, as well as once the Q&A starts. So feel free to, and as well as responding to them. If you see questions in there that your work has addressed, then please, by all means, we hope this is a discussion, and the chat feature will help facilitate that. And then we'll follow up at the end with small breakout sessions where you'll have a chance to connect with each other in a smaller group for about 15 minutes to talk about your work and learn from each other. So I'm now going to turn it over to Catherine Kim, who is the Senior Communications Editor at the Koreatown Youth and Community Center in Los Angeles, to share their intergenerational storytelling project. So, Catherine?
Hi, thank you, Sherry, and Generations United and RRF. I'm really excited to share about our Koreatown Storytelling program. It's out of Los Angeles's Koreatown. It's a project out of KYCC, Koreatown Youth and Community Center, and it's part of our intergenerational initiative that was started in 2017 with funding from the Rrf Foundation. And we started this pilot program in March of 2020, and we actually launched the program 4 days after the safer at home orders were mandated in LA. And so a lot of this is lessons learned and how to pivot and how to address the needs of our community, both the youth and the elders. We started with the youth, and it really came as a community journalism program for the youth, teaching them some extracurricular activities, telling them about our community. And we were hoping to recruit elders, and they were going to meet in person and have these intimate conversations. Well, once the quarantine hit, we noticed that the elders, they couldn't come out of the house. They couldn't even come out to get groceries. A lot of our elders were having transportation issues, even though there were special hours at the grocery store for them. So we decided to go to the elders. So that's when we partnered with Menlo Family Apartments, which is one of KYCC's affordable housing buildings. And we started calling the elders there, asking them what their needs were, if they were doing all right, if there was anything that we could help them with. And they needed hot meals, and they needed essentials like cleaning supplies. Remember, this is like the time period when toilet paper was being hoarded. And so we were able to provide them with some of those essentials. And then through the communication that we had with them, which was over the phone, we built trust, and then they granted the students more opportunities for in-depth interviews. So the youth were then able to interview the elders and really talk about their life experiences. So as part of like our storytelling interview experience, but also the theme really shifted to, what do you think about this pandemic? What is this quarantine experience like for you, for the youth and the elders? And so now I'm really excited. We're in our 4th workshop of our first cohort this year. And again, pivoting to what the themes are, we noticed in July, there were some workplace infections in the garment industry. And Koreatown is home to a lot of the garment district workers, business owners, both Korean and Latinx. And so we decided, let's dive into this community and see how they're being affected by the pandemic. And so our youth are going to be interviewing elders who work in that community. But we also really kind of are very fluid in that we are, like last semester when the BLM protests were happening, we had the youth ask the elders about systemic discrimination in their life. Now that and they were asking about pandemic experiences. And so, we're constantly shifting to make sure that we're asking questions that are relevant, journalistically relevant, but also pertain to the community and the people who live in it. And so we started off, the youth were doing Zoom, but the elders were not as digitally competent. And so to adjust to that, the lessons learned, we wrote letters, we delivered care packages, we hand wrote letters in Korean, Spanish, and English. All of the communication was hand delivered at a safe distance. We also created elder guides for this semester. So these elder guides are just a clear definition of what we're expecting from them, but it also includes, in 3 languages, a tech guide, how to answer your phone, how to FaceTime, how to connect to Zoom in case we want to be working with the elders in that way. And we did survey them to ask them what platforms were the best for them. So for example, in the Korean community, there's an app called KakaoTalk. It's very popular. So we did an elder tech guide on KakaoTalk because we knew that that was going to be the best way for us to be communicating with them. But we noticed that it wasn't just enough to be sort of linguistically competent and giving the elders information in their own languages. We really had to be culturally competent as well. And that was a big lesson for us. So even, for example, doing the evaluations, which is so important in these programs, for some of our elders who are in their 80s and 90s, they didn't understand the concept of the UCLA loneliness survey, or, it's just a concept that was very foreign to them. So we trained our youth to do phone surveys, but they didn't really respond. They didn't really answer to it. So again, we went back to our old school technique. We printed everything out on paper. We translated the surveys and we hand delivered them. And that's when we started getting results back from the community. So we really had to stay attuned to the community's needs. Again, we are going to another elder residence, as well as recruiting elders who are in the garment industry. That way, we can have the most access to our elders. So one of the elder residences that we're working with is called St. James Manor. They came to us and said, we need hot meals. And is it possible for you to help us procure Korean meals, because 82 of their residents are Korean elders. And so the photo on the right is actually me delivering some kimchi. We got a kimchi donation, and we're able to donate things to the elders that they actually are going to use. They told us that even though there were programs like Meals on Wheels, that the elders weren't eating the food, it wasn't comfortable for them, so it was going unused. So we want to make sure that we're supporting the elders in a way that makes sense to them. So some of the next steps that we're doing, also listening to what the community needs are. A lot of our elders are having a hard time accessing the vaccination websites. And so our youth, we're looking into building a program right now where our youth are going to be making the appointments for them, making sure that they can help them get online, get these appointments done. And so we're constantly in this pandemic shifting to what we hear the elders needing, and knowing that the youth are able to troubleshoot for them and help them respond to it. And that builds the trust that enables us to have these relationships where the elders then open up to the young people, and we're able to get these stories. So thank you.
Thank you, Catherine. I love hearing how the program's evolved, as well as sort of, it's so much more than a storytelling program. I mean, when you talk about the different layers there, really, really great. So thank you. And again, feel free to put questions to Catherine in the chat, but we also have time for Q&A later. I'm now going to turn it over to Decky Alexander. Decky's a professor at Eastern Michigan University and founder of Limelight. She's been working with us on a intergenerational podcast, and she's going to share a little bit about that right now. So Decky?
Thank you so much, Sherry. Thank you. So here we go. So we'll preface this a little bit. So what if, right? The distance between generations, the older adults, right, who are living perhaps maybe more quieted lives with pictures on their walls, long framed, and younger adults, right, who are striving to find place or purpose or just figuring out what pictures to post or caption. What if all of a sudden their lives are chronologically at opposite ends of a bookshelf and are remarkably the same? They're both right inside, holed up, sheltering, aging in place, uncertain, and remarkably quiet. They are both, the olders and the youngers, homebound. So Homebound is a podcast that we shaped just in June of 2020, and we launched just in October of 2020. So just during this time. It is an intergenerationally situated podcast. And what we mean is that it's in one in which we view this time of social distance not as a liability, but as an opportunity to create connections and relations through the medium of podcasting. Which is really portable and malleable and immediate, and almost anyone can do it and create it, and more on that later. So here's the background. I was asked back in May of 2020 to put some ideas on intergenerational collaboration as a way to offset the social isolation of older adults. And I had been working in this space professionally through theater. So I put together an intergenerational theater ensemble concept, which, as we know, is not possible in these days. So we had a team of four that conceptualized a podcast, and they include a professional audiographic and video designer, Eric Minnie, and who was my graduate or student like 20 years ago, and two theater students, Catherine Coffey and Tyler Calhoun, former graduate students who were really trained in interviewing and transcription and scripting. And we came up with our podcast, Homebound, a dialogue for the ages. And this is what it sets out to do. It sets out to foster intergenerational interaction and connection in ways that could simultaneously illuminate this time, but also cultivate and capture some real connections between the generations. So here's the layout. So Ypsilanti, Michigan, which is near Detroit and next to Ann Arbor. So we were working with partners such as our Ypsilanti Senior Center and our Housing Commission, which I heard mentioned previously, and Gerbold House, which is a nursing home, and EMU, where I work. And we identified older adults and younger adults who were interested in talking to each other about living in and through this time. So there was real intentionality to pairing the folks together. So it could be culture, it could be race, it could be a commonality, like they're both avid readers. And then we had the young person really be the initiator of these podcast conversations. We interviewed 6 to 7 pairs from July to September 2020, all virtual and Zoom. We would set up makeshift recording spots in the community room or sometimes a parking lot in a public housing community. And we would give equipment even to the assistant at Gerbold House, the actual nursing home. And we would tell that person via the phone how to set it up for their resident Betty. So she and Eric, who's a young person, could share a following exchange just like this. Betty, well, I wake up in the morning and I eat breakfast, and then there isn't much to do, just till TV until lunch. And then if my son is home, I talk to him for hours. Eric, yeah. Betty, he calls faithfully every day, and we talk as long as he can think of anything to say. It's just a little different. I'm not sad. Our conversations were framed in 3 parts. The now. Take us through your everyday. What do you do? The then. Memory. Are there stories or moments that in your life that are just on replay? The future. Is there a dream or something you wish you could be doing or have always wanted to do? So when you listen, we hope you all listen to Homebound, you'll notice the unevenness, right, of the audios. You know, the technology isn't polished. So like a lot of us, we're just leaning into it. I mean, that's the story, the metaphor, right? The striving to connect during this time is frayed. It's an artifact of our time. So this is what worked. We located themes that just emerged organically from the actual interviews. And then we crafted an episode reflecting those themes. We included multiple conversations in each episode. So not a singular conversation, but all these episodes had bits and pieces from all of the convos. And then what could have worked? Well, we'd love to really have older adults and younger adults have interaction prior and building on that. And we would also have them look at the questions prior. So it's more of a dialogue. And here's what we discovered. The recognition that COVID is a great equalizer. A younger person and an older person are under the same quarantines and right now are just relegated to a much smaller world. And we need a companion to Homebound, and we need to create and locate and listen to a podcast. For those older adults, for example, in our assisted living communities, we realized we needed to provide an infographic on how to even find a podcast or listen to it. So we're creating an infographic that could be situated. So my 5 minutes might be up because I talk, even though I talk really, really fast, but we have a season 1 is on our limelightlive.org website, but you can find this podcast on Apple and Google and Spotify. We have a bonus episode coming out and season 2 starts in summer. And I would love to talk to you more about the possibility of podcasting between and among generations. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. We just love how it's this idea of, again, this pivoting and adapting and how can we get the stories out there and elevated. So thank you. I'm now going to turn it over to Chris Kennedy. Chris is the founder and senior projects manager of Age to Age in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. She's going to share about a racism or the project that they called Racism and the Art of Intergenerational Conversations, which is really a pilot that just happened also during the pandemic. So I'm going to turn it over to Chris. All right.
There we are. Thank you, Sherry. As Sherry said, I'm Chris Kennedy with Age to Age. And what we do is to help to envision, design, and launch new age-friendly projects that connect generations, people, and possibilities. So the pilot project, Racism and the Art of Intergenerational Conversations, was launched during the pandemic in order to explore how we might normalize conversations between generations and races. The picture that you see on the slide is the outcome of one of our older gen, younger gen pairs, Rich and Naja. As you look to the left side, you see our artist, Rich, and his vision that was inspired by the symbolism of the Edmund Pettus Bridge is tracing the history of segregation through the 60s when he was active in the civil rights movement. And then Naja, her stylized version on the right, the bridge brings us to her vision of a shared and stronger future. So this project, this seed for it was planted in the summer of 2020 when consciousness about systemic racism was raised with the murder of George Floyd and the Black Lives Matter movement. And while some people stepped up and stepped out in the streets, we were in the pandemic, and we did have a variety of generations that had been impacted and were learning anew that racism still existed. One of those places was a retirement community in Lancaster, Pennsylvania. And in that community, an urgent call was heard by their residents, predominantly white, to answer the question, what can we do? And an answer that was heard was that it all begins with conversations. So Age to Age and creative aging consultant Susan Pearlstein, the founder of the National Center on Creative Aging, we were engaged together to design a project that would initiate conversations across generations and cultures and to explore experiences of these people then and now in order to bridge the past and the present. We forged a partnership for Moravian Manor with Brightside Baptist Church, a predominantly Black congregation, to launch this intergenerational cross-cultural conversation. Since we were dealing with the challenges of the pandemic, a socially distanced 4-session online pilot program was designed. And it was in order to foster discussions between these white older adults and students of color about their values, their interests, history, and their experiences. In the pilot, we had 3 older gens from Moravian Manor and 3 younger gens from Brightside Baptist Church who bravely said yes to go down this experimental project pathway with us. The 4 sessions included brainstorming, interview techniques, art making, and one-to-one breakout sessions, and culminated in a virtual art gallery, a Zoom gathering, where participants shared their perspectives and their art with their families and friends and partner organizations. The feedback and reflections about the project and the art were heartwarming and hopeful. And the hope that Susan and I have is to be able to replicate and fine tune this project in order to create a toolkit to share with others. And I welcome any and all thoughts about this project or the concept. So I think I kept it to 3 minutes. Thank you.
I appreciate it. Everyone's doing their best. There's a lot to share with all of these great programs. Our final presenter before we actually get into Q&A is Adrienne Sutton. Adrienne is the project coordinator for Connect DC, which is a digital inclusion initiative out of the Office of the Chief Technology Officer for the Government of the District of Columbia. We've had the privilege to work with Adrienne on a couple of projects around engagement over online, and he's just going to share some of his tips and thoughts from the question we always get is how to get people connected. So I'm going to turn it over to Adrienne.
Well, thank you so much. That's the best introduction I've ever received. I really promise. So my name is Adrienne Sutton, and I work for OCTO, and OCTO stands for the Office of the Chief Technology Officer. And essentially, that's just the techie part of DC government. If you talk to my CTO, Lindsay Parker, or Mayor Bowser, DC's mayor, they would tell you that there's been no one in Washington, DC who have taught more seniors about technology than Adrienne Sutton. So I have 3 things I want to talk about, and I promise I'm going to shoot through them. The first thing is how local governments are helping older adults get connected during the pandemic. What is the value of intergenerational connections and communities with older adults who are isolated at home? And finally, tips on how you can approach your local government and facilitate virtual programming. So let's start first. DC, I know we're really blessed to have an agency that's focused on older adults. It's called the Department of Aging and Community Living, also known as DACL. Technology. I don't see you guys.
No, we just we turned off the PowerPoint so that we could have faces again. So so you're there. We see you.
You're trying to take away from my 5 minutes. All right. So DACL has launched a senior technology pilot program to help keep older generations connected to family, friends, healthcare information, and different activities. Through this program, seniors who are at risk of social isolation, 500 seniors who are at risk of social isolation and who are currently lacking the access of technology will receive iPads with data on it, and they have like ongoing tech support for those seniors. My agency in particular, OCTO, we had a very successful senior tech workshop where we taught senior citizens how to become millennials with their smart devices. Because of COVID, I can't like face-to-face teach anyone anymore. So my partners at Facebook and my partners at DACL with the different senior wellness centers, they helped me create hybrid versions of these programs to where it's about 10 seniors on a Zoom call. If it goes over like an hour or 2, then I just call them and we have like one-on-one help. And also in Washington, D.C., if you're a senior that's acting as a guardian, then you're eligible for free to like low cost internet. Really, it's free internet through our Internet for All program. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that in the Q&A. Question number 2. What is the value of intergenerational communities connecting with older adults who are isolated at home? Combating senior isolation is a top priority for Mayor Bowser and myself. Here in DC, Almost half of the residents who are above 60 years old live by themselves. We have some independent seniors in Washington, D.C., if you haven't noticed. All right. Social isolation has profound negative effects on your health, similar to a person who smokes 15 cigarettes a day. All right. It adds to inactivity, it adds to obesity. So us combating the senior isolation requires investments of the entire community. So again, this isn't like a government fixer up type of thing. This is more or less like a, hey, reach out to your neighbors type of thing. Also, what our government has going on, we have DACO has a program called Notes to Neighbors, right? And we also have Cupid's Kids Outreach. This is where Cupid's Kids Outreach is where public school students, they make handmade Valentine's Day cards and they send it out to homebound seniors. Notes to Neighbors is a program to where if you haven't seen a neighbor in a while, you could send them a note and DC will kind of facilitate that for you. Lastly, because I'm down to my last 30 seconds, tips on how you and I can approach our local governments to facilitate and access virtual programming. Again, I know DC is like the greatest place in America, right? Or in the world, if you let me say it. We have a program. It's not really a program. It's more like a call to action partnership called Tech Together. It's a values-led partnership between DC government, our nonprofit community, our education community, and these big tech industry leaders. We're working together to bridge the digital divide through access, training, and opportunities. So I would suggest, and I would encourage that you reach out to like your council members or your mayor's office to see if there's a similar partnership that's being made. And if not, let them know what DC has going on. And also just be very clear that you want to help that you want to help virtually. Be very clear that like, hey, your service may not, it don't have to require a dollar sign to it. And if your government is giving you some pushback, then just start with your family members, right? Or your neighbors next door. If you have any questions for me, again, my name is Adrian Sutton. I have a really, really easy email. You ready? It's connect, like how we're all connecting today, at dc.gov. Connect at dc.gov. And you could learn more about the Tech Together initiative and all the other DACO initiatives as well. Oh, and then I see someone drop something in the chat box. Woot, woot. All right, is that my 5 minutes? Did I go over? Did I do good?
That's okay. Like, I mean, we appreciate everyone trying to stick to their time. We know that it's really hard. I know it's really hard. I never stick to my time either. I was telling the presenters earlier, I tend to go off the script. It's wonderful. Thank you all for sharing. And as I mentioned, these are just some of the great programs that we've heard about. I know some of the people on the call today have been doing excellent work remotely and connecting the generations. And we want to be sure to, shout yourselves out, pat yourselves on the back, put yourselves in the chat about what work that's going on, because it is just part of a larger work, and we all learn from sharing. We do have a time for some questions and answers. One question that came out earlier, and I'm not sure if any of our panelists have had to deal with this, the question about getting fingerprinting older adults to work within public school systems. And I'm not sure, I know that it really varies depending on the communities. I don't know if anyone has any tips that they wanted to share about that. Chris, yes.
Yes. So another program that we launched during the pandemic is called Z Tutors for Zooming tutorial older adults with students, and they are required to do all of the clearances before they're able to work with the students. And so that fingerprinting is definitely part of it. They need to go to a site and get their fingerprints done. And one of the challenges that has just come up is that as you age, your fingerprints sometimes wear down. And so some of our older adults have been not cleared, and they have to go through a longer background FBI check. So just let them know that it's just to be patient.
And I know one of our partners we're working with in Michigan is having similar challenges of a pretty comprehensive online onboarding form for older adults that needs some of that one-on-one help to get done. Great. We also had a question about how have the organizations been doing the remote conversations in terms of ratios? Is it with the adults to young people? Is it 1-to-1, 2-to-1, small groups? How has that been working out for you? Do you want to say Decky?
Well, I think not actually in the podcast. I have a intergenerational improvisational storytelling workshop that we have that's both in Ypsilanti and then launching in Detroit. And it's 1-to-1. So we have a group of 10, we have a group of either 10 to 12. And we keep that because we want everyone to be seen in the virtual space. So we intentionally do 1-to-1. So there's also an opportunity to do some real pairing work and some real more intimate interactions between duos and not just the group as well. So group to small group. So we're doing 1-to-1.
I put down that we do a youth to an elder. So elder is 55 and over. But they also do an oral history interview with a community member. So that person can be anywhere between like 30 and 55. So that they have, we have them do the community member interview first so that they get some experience. First, they do a peer interview. They interview their peer first. And then they get their practice working with their peer. And then they do the community member interview, which is a bit of an icebreaker for them. And then they go into their elder interview. One student got super ambitious. She's like, the editor of her school newspaper, and she wanted to do 3 elders. So we said that was fine because she had trilingual capacity and we didn't have a Spanish speaking youth. So we gave her the Spanish speaking elder, the Korean speaking elder, and then her English speaking elder.
It's great. We had another question about sort of intentions or limitations around pairing along gender lines. So I know, Decky, you mentioned some of the pairings. So I don't know if folks have any of their experiences about how, I know we've heard from folks that it runs the gamut on what they do in terms of their youth and elder pairings. So if there's any thoughts there.
It's interesting. When we wanted to really work with older adults in assisted living facilities, it was hard to identify with men in particular, that it was a harder ask or a want to be able to participate in this particular kind of interaction. So I think, I'm not sure, that's just might be anecdotal, but I think I saw it as an opportunity versus a liability, but there is intentional, not sometimes it's gender, but it really is probably based upon energy and experience is how we're pairing people, sometimes background, so they can. We have one of the conversations in the podcast over the episodes is a young Black man and an older Black man who also was involved in a lot of activism. And so we really wanted to bring those two voices together so they can cultivate and share their histories and present ideas about what it means to take action along race lines. So.
I think there's also sort of a number of programs where the intention of the pairing would be to talk for, it's sort of what the goal is, whether that's a factor that you're trying to address or not. I mean, but I know that there's been some great examples from some of the projects. I know that Sages and Seekers had a great example of a younger woman and an older man that connected over their virtual connections and really learned a lot from each other.
I'm going to add, do I have time to add something?
Yep, please do.
One of our youth, young woman, we didn't do anything intentionally or unintentionally, but one of our young women interviewed an older Korean man. And she had a lot of issues with him because he was very gruff and sort of grumpy. She, reported back to me, she's like, I'm having some problems with it. But in the end, she ended up having one of the most interesting interviews with him. He actually, once we culled everything together, a lot of stuff came out of that conversation, but we did have a training with the youth on speaking to elders, especially with the Korean honorific and language. We had the same for Spanish speaking, so we made sure that we included that language for the youth. This semester, sadly, for my group of youth, 2 out of 8 of my youth have lost a parent to COVID. And so I paired them together. And so they're going to be interviewing each other. And we kind of changed some of the interview questions that I thought would be really interesting to have the elders, to have a question about grief for the elders, so that the youth can get some of the elders' lessons around that, because my youth are very young. They're 16 and 17 years old, and they're struggling, honestly, with this experience. And I thought this is really something that the elders can be empathetic towards the youth in and really be able to help. So that was very intentional in terms of our pairings.
Great, thank you. Any other comments on from our panelists on pairing? I know that there's a lot of intentionality in what goes on. It's not sort of just the throw people into a pot and see what happens, the stone soup approach, but great. I know there was one other question just for, I believe it was for Catherine, around a training program with youth that was not successful, so converted to sharing information via documents. What were the concerns or disinterest factors among the youth? What sort of were those points that made you make that decision?
I think it was more that our elders were in limited income affordable housing, and they didn't have the same access to iPads or even smartphones in the way that some of the other elders in other programs might have. We did have people who volunteered to be in our program from the community, and they had smartphones, but for these elders who are more like immigrant communities, they didn't have that. And so our youth, I feel like, we're very understanding. They know this community pretty well and are from this community itself. And so they were down to do the letter writing and the phone calls. That seemed to work the best. But they had to be even with the phone call, they had to be persistent, because when you see an unidentified number, people don't answer that. So we would have to keep trying and keep trying. But that's part of the journalism training, is teaching them to be persistent.
Great. I'm sure there's more questions that are going to come in. We'll try to do our best to, in the follow-up that we do, to respond to those, or at least give contact information for everyone. I do want to take time for us to have smaller group conversations, and that may be another opportunity to get some of these questions and ideas shared. So we're going to break into smaller groups for networking and conversation. There'll be, hopefully, if I do my math correctly, should be like 4 to 5 people in each group, but this is a big if, because we're depending on me doing math correctly. But just an idea, when you get to the small group conversations, share your name, location again, have one idea that excites you, that you've heard about today or that maybe came up. And then one thing that you can do. Oh, sorry, I think we have, okay, I think someone came off mute. And one thing you can do to move intergenerational work forward in your community, and then we'll just follow back up after the breakouts with a closing. I do want to take the chance to, if for folks don't come back, to thank our speakers again. I think it's been a really enlightening discussion. I've learned a lot, and I'm excited to learn more and see how these programs continue to develop. So I'm going to go ahead and do the breakouts right now. Okay, and I start to see people disappearing, so that means it must have worked. And if Danica or Emily, whoever's hitting record, if you could just pause the recording. Great. I think folks are starting to come back. The rooms are closing. Never quite sure how all of this works. Let's see. Well, welcome back, everyone. I hope you had a chance to meet a new colleague or reconnect with an old one. If anyone was still in the main room, I was laughing about how it randomly selected people that I know each other to put them in the rooms together. So that's always fun. The last couple of things we wanted to share as we close out is that I just again wanted folks to save the dates. There is a webinar coming up in 2 weeks that we're co-hosting with the American Society on Aging, Stronger Together, the benefits of intergenerational programs for everyone. So the link is on the screen and it's been shared in chat if you're interested in signing up for that. We also have, again, our conference, the Generations United Global Intergenerational Conference, which will be held virtually June 15th through 17th this summer. So there's a link there. Registration is open. Our call for proposals has closed, but we're working on creating the program, the educational program for that event right now. So feel free to register, check out, again, sign up for Generations this week, which is our e-newsletter, which will share all the updates. We do not share emails of people who register for these types of webinars, but feel free to in chat to send a message. If there's someone you'd like to continue a conversation with, our speakers have all offered their emails and we'll make sure that that's in the follow-up if you want to learn more about their programs and the work that they're doing. Send a private message if you want to connect, or again, just put the word out there. As I mentioned, we will be sending a follow-up email today with a link to the recording, other resources that have been shared, as well as a survey, an evaluation survey for the webinar. So we'd really appreciate any feedback that you have. It helps us plan future events and will be really helpful in planning our virtual conference. I want to just take another second just to give a round of applause to all of our speakers today. Thank you, Catherine, Decky, Chris, Adrian. Thank you, Amy from Rrf Foundation for Aging, for supporting this conversation and the intergenerational resources. And thank you to all of you for joining us today. And the final thanks for the work that you're doing and the interest in building a better world for younger and older people. Thank you again. We look forward to connecting with you on the next one. Take care.